Jake Morrison pressed his face against the transport window and whistled softly. Kepler Station stretched out before them like a massive metal city floating in space. The structure was bigger than anything he had ever seen, with spinning rings and glowing towers that seemed to go on forever. Behind it, a giant gas planet painted everything in shades of purple and gold. "Holy cow," Amy Carter said from the seat next to him. "Look at the size of that thing." Lisa Brooks checked her tablet for the third time in 10 minutes. "According to this, over 50,000 students from 200 different worlds study here. We're going to be so lost." Ryan Clark, the youngest of their group at 19, was already taking pictures with his phone. "My mom is never going to believe this. I mean, we're actually here. We're actually going to school with real aliens." The 4 humans had been selected from thousands of applicants for the exchange program. Jake was studying engineering back at Texas Tech. Amy wanted to be a xenobiologist ever since she was 12 and saw her first documentary about alien life. Lisa was working on her physics degree at Columbia. Ryan was the computer whiz from Cal Tech who could hack into anything. Their transport ship docked with a soft bump. Through the speakers, a voice spoke in perfect English, though it sounded strange, like music played through water. "Welcome to Kepler Station, students from Earth. Please gather your belongings and proceed to docking bay 7. You will be met by your orientation guides." They grabbed their bags and followed the other passengers off the ship. The docking bay was huge, with ceilings that disappeared into shadows above. But what caught their attention were the other passengers. Jake had seen aliens on video calls and news programs, but seeing them in person was different. A group of tall, thin beings with blue skin walked past, their movements graceful like dancers. Behind them came something that looked like a walking tree, its bark-like skin glowing with soft patterns of light. "Try not to stare," Lisa whispered, but she was staring too. A creature that appeared to be made of living crystal approached them. When it spoke, its voice sounded like wind chimes. "Are you the human students? I am Zixthara. I will help you today." "That's us," Jake said, trying to sound more confident than he felt. "I'm Jake, and these are Amy, Lisa, and Ryan." Zixthara's crystal body sparkled. "Excellent. Follow me, please. We must hurry to orientation. All new students are required to attend safety training before they can access the station." They walked through corridors filled with beings Jake couldn't have imagined in his wildest dreams. Some floated instead of walking. Others had tentacles instead of arms. A few looked almost human except for different colored skin or extra eyes. "This is incredible," Amy whispered. "Look at the diversity. Each species must have evolved under completely different conditions." They entered a massive auditorium filled with hundreds of students. Zixthara led them to a section near the front. Then stopped. "I am sorry," the crystal being said, "but humans must wait in a different room. Your safety requirements are special." "Special how?" Lisa asked. Before Zixthara could answer, a new voice interrupted them. This one was higher-pitched, almost like a bird singing. They turned to see a tall alien with feathers instead of hair and large golden eyes. "I am Professor Quillnax," the being said. "I handle student safety for the station. Humans, please come with me." Jake looked at his friends. They all seemed confused, but they followed the professor out of the auditorium and down a quiet hallway. Professor Quillnax led them to a small room with comfortable chairs and a large window showing the gas giant outside. "Please sit," the professor said. "I know this seems strange, but your species requires different safety considerations than our other students." "Different how?" Ryan asked. "Are we in danger?" Professor Quillnax made a sound that might have been a laugh. "Not exactly. The other students are currently learning about the many dangers of station life. They will spend the next 4 hours learning about atmospheric pressure, radiation exposure, toxic substances, electrical hazards, and emergency procedures." "Shouldn't we learn that stuff too?" Amy asked. "Your species..." The professor paused as if trying to find the right words. "Your species comes from what we call a death world. The safety measures that protect other students are not necessary for humans. In fact, some of our standard safety equipment might actually be harmful to you." Jake leaned forward. What do you mean by death world? Your planet Earth has conditions that would kill most galactic species within minutes. High oxygen levels, dangerous radiation from your sun, extreme weather, poisonous plants and animals, and gravity that would crush many of our students. Yet humans not only survive there, you thrive. Lisa crossed her arms. So, what does that mean for us here? It means we are still determining how to keep you safe without, how do you say, babying you. The station environment is designed for the most fragile species we host. For humans, it might feel too soft, too protected. Through the window, they could see other students walking past in small groups. Many wore what looked like environmental suits, or carried breathing devices. Is that why everyone has all that safety gear? Ryan asked. Correct. The hydrants need moisture suits to keep their gills working. The Veltar require crystal resonators to maintain their structural integrity. The Cathara must have temperature regulators because they are cold-blooded. But humans, Professor Quillnack spread his feathered arms. Humans adapt. Amy stood up and walked to the window. So while everyone else is learning safety rules, we're just supposed to sit here. For now, yes. We are developing modified safety protocols for your species. It should only take a few more hours. Jake looked at his friends. They had come here to learn, to experience life among the stars, and they were being kept in a room, like children. Professor, Jake said carefully, what if we just looked around the station while we wait? You know, get familiar with the place? Professor Quillnax's golden eyes widened. Unsupervised, that would be highly irregular. We'll be careful, Lisa added. We just want to see our new home. The professor was quiet for a long moment. Finally, he made that laughing sound again. I suppose humans have been exploring dangerous places for thousands of years. Very well, but please stay in the public areas, and if any alarms sound, return here immediately. They thanked the professor and left the room. As soon as they were in the hallway, Ryan grinned. Did anyone else think that was weird? He asked. Everything about this place is weird, Amy replied, but she was smiling too. Come on, let's go see what kind of trouble we can get into. They walked down the corridor together, 4 humans loose, on an alien space station, completely unaware that they were about to show the galaxy exactly why Earth was considered a death world. The 4 humans spent the next hour exploring Kepler Station. Everything was built on a massive scale, with wide corridors and high ceilings that made them feel small. They passed shops selling foods they couldn't identify, classrooms with equipment that looked like art sculptures, and recreation areas where alien students floated in pools of strange-colored liquids. Look at this, Amy said, stopping at a directory map. The hydroponics bay is supposed to be amazing. They grow food from 100 different worlds there. That sounds cool, Jake agreed. Better than sitting in that room waiting. They found their way to the hydroponics section, following signs written in dozens of different languages. The English translations were sometimes confusing, but they managed to find the right path. The hydroponics bay was incredible. It stretched out like a forest made of metal and glass, with plants growing in towers that reached up toward artificial suns. Some plants looked almost normal, like corn or tomatoes. Others were completely alien, with leaves that glowed or flowers that seemed to move on their own. A group of about 20 students were gathered around a tour guide near the entrance. The guide was one of the tree-like beings they had seen earlier, with bark-covered skin and leaves growing from his head like hair. Welcome to our agricultural center, the guide was saying in a voice that sounded like rustling leaves. Here, we grow food suitable for all species aboard the station. Please stay close to the group and do not touch anything without permission. Jake and his friends joined the back of the group. Most of the other students were wearing some kind of protective gear. Many had breathing masks or small devices attached to their clothes. The guide led them down a walkway between rows of growing towers. As you can see, each section is carefully controlled for temperature, humidity, and atmospheric content. What is safe for one species may be deadly for another. They stopped at a section where strange purple fruits hung from vines. These Vorthan melons are delicious and nutritious, the guide explained, but the juice is highly acidic. It would burn through most organic tissue. Ryan leaned over to Jake. Acidic? Like, how acidic are we talking? Before Jake could answer, a loud bang echoed through the bay. Everyone stopped walking and looked around nervously. The guide's leaves rustled with worry. That sounded like it came from the lower level. Perhaps we should return to the main corridor. Another bang followed by a hissing sound. Then the smell hit them. It was sharp and bitter, making several of the alien students start coughing immediately. Chemical leak, someone shouted. Ammonia coolant system failure. Red lights began flashing throughout the bay. An automated voice spoke in multiple languages. Emergency in Section 7. All personnel evacuate immediately. Toxic atmosphere detected. The alien students panicked. Some ran toward the exits while others fumbled with emergency breathing equipment. The guide was trying to keep everyone calm, but his own leaves were turning brown from whatever was in the air. Jake could smell the ammonia now. It was strong, like the cleaning supplies his mother used, but much worse. It made his eyes water and his throat burn a little, but he could still breathe. Everyone stay calm, he called out, but most of the aliens were already running. That's when they heard the screaming. Through the walkway railings, Jake could see down to the lower level of the hydroponics bay. 3 students were trapped behind a fallen support beam. The air down there was thick with white vapor, and the students were clearly having trouble breathing. One was Zixthera, the crystal being who had met them at the docking bay. The other 2 Jake didn't recognize, but they were both wearing breathing masks that didn't seem to be working. We have to help them, Amy said immediately. Are you crazy? Ryan pointed at the white cloud. That stuff is toxic, you heard the announcement. Jake was already moving toward the stairs leading to the lower level. They'll die if we don't do something. Lisa grabbed his arm. Jake, we don't have any protective gear. Look around, Jake said. Half the aliens up here are already having trouble breathing, and they do have protective gear. We're probably the only ones who can handle it. He pulled his shirt up over his nose and mouth. Amy, you're the biology student. How bad is ammonia poisoning? Bad, Amy said, but she was already following him toward the stairs. But it takes time. If we're fast, we might be okay. The air got thicker as they went down the stairs. Jake could hear the hissing of the broken coolant pipe somewhere in the maze of plant towers. The white vapor made it hard to see more than a few feet ahead. Over here, Zixthera's voice sounded weak and musical, like wind chimes in a storm. Jake held his breath and ran toward the sound. The fallen beam was huge, made of metal and probably weighing several hundred pounds. It had crashed down at an angle, trapping the 3 students in a small space. Can you move at all? Amy asked, kneeling down next to them. The beam is too heavy, one of the other students gasped. It was a small, furry creature with large ears. We cannot lift it. Jake examined the beam. It was heavy, but he had lifted heavier things back home on the farm. Lisa, Ryan, get over here. We need to lift this thing. Jake, that's got to weigh at least 400 pounds, Lisa protested, but she was already getting into position. So? We've got 4 people. That's 100 pounds each. I've lifted more than that. The ammonia vapor was getting thicker. Jake's eyes were streaming tears now, and his throat felt raw. But the trapped students looked much worse. Zixthera's crystal body was losing its shine, and the furry student was barely conscious. On 3, Jake said. 1, 2, 3. They lifted together. The beam was incredibly heavy, but it moved. Jake felt his muscles strain, but he had been working construction jobs since he was 16. This was just like moving steel beams on a job site, except with poison gas instead of his dad yelling at him. Got it, Amy called out. She helped pull the trapped students out from under the beam, while Jake, Lisa, and Ryan held it up. As soon as the students were clear, they let the beam drop with a loud crash. Jake grabbed Zixthera under one arm while Amy helped the furry student. Lisa and Ryan took the 3rd student, who seemed to be unconscious. They ran for the stairs, half carrying, half dragging the rescued students. The ammonia cloud was getting worse, but Jake found that if he held his breath, and only took small breaths when he absolutely had to, he could keep going. By the time they reached the upper level, emergency crews were arriving. Beings in full environmental suits with breathing equipment were setting up barriers and medical stations. Medical assistance needed here, Lisa shouted. The emergency crews rushed over with equipment Jake didn't recognize. They immediately began treating the 3 rescued students, checking their breathing and hooking them up to various machines. One of the emergency workers, wearing a suit that covered him completely, approached the humans. "You 4 need immediate medical attention. Ammonia exposure at those levels should have been fatal." "We're fine," Jake said, though his voice was rough from the gas. "Just need some water and fresh air." The emergency worker scanned them with a handheld device. He looked at the readout, then scanned them again. "This cannot be correct," he said. "According to these readings, you absorbed enough ammonia to kill most species. But your vital signs are normal." Amy wiped her streaming eyes with her sleeve. "We're from Earth. We're tougher than we look." 20 minutes later, the 4 humans were sitting in a decontamination shower, washing off the last traces of the chemical leak. Through the glass, they could see the medical area where the 3 alien students were being treated. "Are they going to be okay?" Ryan asked. A medical worker gave them a thumbs up. "All 3 will make full recoveries. If you had not acted so quickly, they would have died." Jake leaned back against the shower wall. "Well, that was interesting." "Interesting?" Lisa laughed, but it sounded shaky. "We just walked into a poison gas cloud and lifted a 400-pound beam to save 3 aliens. That's not interesting, that's insane." "But it worked," Amy pointed out. "And now we know why Professor Quillnax was acting so weird about human safety protocols." Through the medical bay windows, they could see Zixthara sitting up and looking around. When the crystal being saw them, it raised one arm in what was probably a wave. Jake waved back. "I don't think we're going to be sitting in waiting rooms anymore." Word about the rescue spread quickly through Kepler Station. By the next morning, every alien student seemed to know about the 4 humans who had walked into poison gas to save their classmates. Jake and his friends found themselves the center of attention wherever they went. Their first real classes started that day. Jake was excited to finally learn some advanced engineering from alien professors who had built things like faster-than-light ships and space stations. But when he arrived at his engineering lab, he quickly realized something was wrong. "Today we will be learning about basic structural design," announced Professor Krellnox, a tall being with 6 arms and skin like green metal. "We will be working with safe, non-toxic materials to create simple frameworks." Jake looked at the supplies on his workbench. There were soft, flexible rods that bent easily in his hands, and a joining compound that looked like colorful pudding. The other students in the class seemed excited, but Jake was confused. "Professor," he raised his hand. "What are we supposed to build with this stuff? These rods are too soft to support any real weight." Professor Krellnox's 6 arms moved nervously. "The materials are perfectly adequate for educational purposes. We cannot risk student injury with harder materials." Jake picked up one of the rods and bent it in half without effort. "But how can we learn about real structural engineering if we can't work with real materials?" The professor's skin changed from green to a pale yellow color. "Human Morrison, please remember that what is safe for your species may not be safe for others." Jake looked around the classroom. The other students were carefully handling the soft rods like they were made of glass. One student, who looked like a large jellyfish floating in a water-filled suit, was having trouble even picking up the materials. Meanwhile, Amy was having her own frustrations in the xenobiology lab. She had been looking forward to studying alien life forms, but Professor Silthera had only provided holographic projections to examine. "These are beautiful," Amy said, looking at the 3-dimensional image of a creature that looked like a flower, with legs. "But I can't really learn about biology from pictures. Can we see some real specimens?" Professor Silthera, who resembled a walking tree with crystal formations growing from her branches, made a sound like breaking glass. "Real specimens would be far too dangerous for classroom study. Some of these organisms produce acids, toxins, or electromagnetic fields." Amy leaned forward with interest. "That sounds fascinating. How do the toxins work? What kind of acids do they produce?" "I cannot provide such dangerous information to students," the professor replied quickly. "We will continue with holographic study only." Amy looked at the other students in the class. They all seemed perfectly happy studying the safe, fake images. She raised her hand again. Professor, what if I signed a safety waiver? I really want to learn about real xenobiology. The professor's crystal formations began glowing bright red, which Amy guessed meant alarm. Absolutely not. The liability would be enormous. In the physics lab, Lisa was facing similar problems. Professor Vexhara, a being made of what looked like living electricity contained in a glass suit, was demonstrating safe electrical experiments, using tiny batteries that produced less power than a flashlight. Today we will observe the fascinating properties of low-voltage electrical current, the professor announced, his electric form flickering gently inside his containment suit. Lisa watched as he connected a small light bulb to a battery that barely made it glow. The other students in the class seemed amazed, taking careful notes about the dangerous electrical forces they were witnessing. Professor, Lisa said, I work with higher voltages than this in my dorm room when I charge my laptop. Can we try something more challenging? Professor Vexahara's electric form turned bright red with alarm. Higher voltages? Are you suggesting we work with potentially lethal electrical current? Well, yeah, Lisa said. How else can we learn about real electrical engineering? This battery couldn't power a calculator. The professor's form flickered rapidly. Human. Brooks, your species' tolerance for electrical current is well documented, but we cannot risk exposing other students to such extreme dangers. Lisa looked around the classroom. Her fellow students were staring at her with what she assumed was horror. One student, who looked like a large insect with beautiful wings, had actually moved his chair farther away from her. Ryan was having the most frustrating experience of all in his computer programming class. Professor Quintar, a being with multiple tentacles instead of arms, was teaching them to write simple programs using a language that had dozens of safety restrictions built in. Remember, Professor Quintar said, his tentacles dancing over a holographic keyboard, our programming language prevents any commands that might damage computer systems or access unauthorized data. Ryan looked at his screen. The programming language was so restricted that he couldn't even write a program to calculate math problems. Every time he tried to write something useful, the system blocked him with safety warnings. Professor, he said, how are we supposed to learn real programming if we can't actually program anything? Professor Quintar's tentacles curled up with worry. The unrestricted programming languages used by your species are considered weapons-grade technology by galactic standards. We cannot teach such dangerous tools to students. Ryan stared at his screen in disbelief. Weapons grade? I learned this stuff when I was 12. At lunch, the four humans met in the cafeteria to share their frustrations. The alien food was interesting but bland, designed to be safe for every species rather than taste good to anyone. This is ridiculous, Jake said, poking at something that looked like blue jello but tasted like cardboard. I came here to learn advanced engineering, not play with toy building blocks. At least you got to touch your materials, Amy replied. Everything in my biology class is holographic. I might as well be watching TV. Lisa pushed her food around her plate. They act like electricity is some kind of mystical force. I've been building electronics since I was 10. And they think basic programming is too dangerous for students, Ryan added. What kind of education is this? As they talked, other students began approaching their table. First came Zixthara, the crystal being they had rescued the day before. Excuse me, Zixthara said, his harmonic voice sounding nervous. I wanted to thank you again for saving my life. But I also have a request. Sure, Jake said. What do you need? I am taking an advanced chemistry course, but there is an assignment I cannot complete. The professor wants us to handle a solution that is mildly acidic. For my species, even weak acids can cause permanent damage. Amy looked interested. How acidic are we talking? The pH level is approximately 4.5, Zixthara replied. Amy almost laughed. That's less acidic than orange juice. I can help you with that, no problem. Zixthara's crystal body sparkled with what looked like relief. You would do that? Even though it is dangerous? It's not dangerous, Amy said gently. At least not for humans. Soon other students were approaching with similar requests. Gloop 7, the aquatic student in the water suit, needed help with a physics experiment involving deadly electrical current that was actually just 12 volts. A small furry student named Pipsqueak wanted help handling toxic plant samples that turned out to be less dangerous than common earth weeds. As the requests kept coming, Jake began to understand what was happening. "They're not treating us like students," he said to his friends. "They're treating us like we're made of weapons." "Or like we're weapons ourselves," Lisa added. Amy looked around at all the alien students who were now gathered around their table, each with some dangerous assignment they needed help with. "Maybe we are," she said thoughtfully. "Not weapons, but I don't know. Like walking disaster response teams?" Jake stood up from the table. "Well, if that's what they think we are, maybe we should talk to Professor Quillnax. This whole educational system is broken if nobody can actually learn anything because it's too dangerous." Ryan nodded. "I didn't come to Space College to play with toy computers." As they left the cafeteria, followed by a small crowd of alien students with dangerous homework assignments, Jake wondered what exactly they had gotten themselves into. But one thing was clear. Their education at Kepler Station was going to be very different from what they had expected. 3 days later, Jake was helping Gloop 7 with a simple electrical circuit when the lights went out. The darkness lasted only a few seconds before emergency lighting kicked in, bathing everything in red light. Then the station's announcement system crackled to life. "Attention all students and faculty. We are experiencing a solar storm of unprecedented intensity. All students must report to emergency shelters immediately. This is not a drill." Jake looked around the study room where he and several alien students had been working. The aliens were already panicking. Gloop 7's water suit began making worried, bubbling sounds. Zixthera's crystal body was flashing rapid colors that probably meant fear. "What's a solar storm?" Ryan asked. But before anyone could answer, Professor Quillnax's voice came over the intercom again. "All organic life forms must evacuate to the central core immediately. Radiation levels throughout the outer sections are rising to lethal levels. You have 30 minutes to reach safety." The alien students rushed for the door, but Professor Quillnax appeared in the doorway, blocking their path. His feathers were standing up in agitation. "Humans, you must come with me now. The radiation levels will kill you if you stay here." Jake followed the professor and his friends toward the central core of the station. The corridors were filled with panicking students and faculty. Some were already showing signs of radiation sickness, their skin changing colors or their movements becoming sluggish. The central core was a massive chamber built like a bunker, with thick walls designed to block radiation. Thousands of beings were crowded inside, and more kept arriving every minute. Jake had never seen so many different species in one place. But the room was already getting crowded, and Jake could see they had a problem. "Professor," Amy called out over the noise, "how long do we have to stay in here?" Professor Quillnax consulted a handheld device that was beeping frantically. "The solar storm should pass in 12 hours, but..." He paused and looked at the device again. "The atmospheric processors have been damaged by electromagnetic pulses. If they are not repaired within 6 hours, the station's life support will fail." "Can't the maintenance robots fix them?" Lisa asked. "The robots have been destroyed by the electromagnetic radiation. We would need to send repair teams, but the radiation levels in those areas would kill any organic being within minutes." Jake felt a cold realization creeping over him. "What kind of radiation levels are we talking about?" Professor Quillnax showed him the readings on his device. "Between 800 and 1200 rads per hour in the damaged sections. Fatal. For all known organic species." Jake looked at the numbers and did some quick math in his head. Those were definitely dangerous levels, but not instantly lethal for humans. He had learned about radiation exposure in his engineering safety courses back on Earth. "Professor," he said carefully, "humans can survive higher radiation levels than most species. How long would it take to fix the atmospheric processors?" The professor's golden eyes widened. "You cannot be suggesting what I think you are suggesting." "How long?" Jake insisted. "With a skilled team working quickly, perhaps 3 hours. But the radiation exposure would be certain death." Jake looked at his 3 friends. Amy was already nodding. Lisa had that determined look she got when she was solving a difficult problem. Ryan looked scared but was clearly thinking the same thing. It wouldn't be certain death for humans, Amy said. We'd get sick, but we could probably survive. Long enough to make the repairs. Professor Quillnax made a sound like a bird being strangled. Absolutely not. I cannot allow students to commit suicide. It's not suicide if we survive, Jake said. Look, we've got thousands of people in this room. If the life support fails, they all die. If we try to fix it and fail, they still all die. But if we try and succeed, everyone lives. More beings were crowding into the central core. Jake could see that some of the older or more fragile species were already having trouble breathing in the cramped conditions. The radiation will cook you alive, Professor Quillnax protested. Maybe, Lisa said. Or maybe we're tougher than you think. We won't know unless we try. A new voice interrupted them. I can provide some data on human radiation tolerance. They turned to see a being that looked like a walking computer, with screens and lights covering its metallic body. Jake didn't recognize the species. I am Archive Unit 7, a synthetic being. My databases contain extensive information on all species. Humans have survived radiation exposures up to 1,500 rads and recovered with medical treatment. The exposure levels in the damaged sections, while extremely high, are within the theoretical survival range for human physiology. Professor Quillnax's feathers drooped. Theoretical survival is not actual survival. Professor, Jake said, we need to make a decision quickly. How much time do we have left? The professor checked his device again. 5 hours and 43 minutes. Jake looked around the crowded shelter. More beings were arriving every minute and the air was getting stale. Some of the smaller species were already collapsing from the stress. We're going, he decided. Give us whatever equipment we need and show us where to go. I cannot authorize this, Professor Quillnax said, but his voice was weak. Then don't authorize it, Amy said. We're not asking for permission. We're telling you what we're going to do. Archive Unit 7 approached them. If you are determined to attempt this, I can provide technical assistance. My synthetic nature makes me immune to radiation. I can guide you to the damaged systems. That would help a lot, Ryan said. What kind of repairs are we looking at? The synthetic being projected a holographic map of the station. 3 atmospheric processors have been damaged by electromagnetic overload. The repairs require manual restart of backup systems, replacement of burned-out circuits, and recalibration of environmental controls. Lisa studied the map. I can handle the electrical systems. Amy, you understand biological life support better than any of us. Jake, you're the best with mechanical repairs. Ryan, you can work with the computer systems. What about safety equipment? Jake asked. Professor Quillnax, looking defeated, gestured to a wall of lockers. Radiation badges to monitor your exposure levels, emergency medical supplies, communication devices so we can track your progress. They spent 20 minutes gathering equipment and studying the repair procedures. Archive Unit 7 downloaded technical manuals directly into handheld devices for them to reference. As they prepared to leave the shelter, Professor Quillnax approached Jake one last time. I want you to know, the professor said quietly, that in 300 years of managing this station, no student has ever attempted anything this dangerous to save others. Well, Jake replied, you've never had human students before. They left the safety of the central core and stepped into the radiation-flooded corridors of Kepler Station. Jake's radiation badge immediately began clicking rapidly, measuring the invisible death that surrounded them. How are you guys feeling? He asked as they walked toward the first damaged atmospheric processor. Like I'm getting a really bad sunburn from the inside, Amy replied, but she kept walking. The air tastes like metal, Lisa added. Ryan was checking his radiation badge. We're definitely getting cooked, but slowly. We should have enough time if we work fast. Archive Unit 7 led them through corridors that would have been instantly fatal to any of the aliens huddled in the central core. The synthetic being's lights flickered occasionally from the electromagnetic interference, but it kept moving. First processor is just ahead, Archive Unit 7 announced. Estimated repair time 45 minutes. Jake checked his watch. 4 hours and 58 minutes left. Let's get to work. They entered the processor chamber, where massive machines hummed and sparked with damaged electronics. The radiation here was so intense that Jake could actually feel it, like standing too close to a fire. But they had work to do, and thousands of lives were depending on them. The first atmospheric processor looked like a mechanical nightmare. Sparks flew from broken circuits and warning lights flashed everywhere. The radiation was so strong that Jake could taste metal in his mouth, but they had no choice except to keep working. "Amy, check the biological filtration systems," Jake called out over the noise of damaged machinery. "Lisa, I need you on the main power coupling. Ryan, see if you can get the computer controls working." Archive Unit 7 projected holographic repair instructions in front of each of them. Primary concern is the atmospheric recycling chamber. It has overheated and shut down completely. Jake crawled into a maintenance shaft that was barely wide enough for his shoulders. The metal was hot from radiation, and his hands were already starting to feel numb. But he could see the problem. A major pipe connection had melted, and coolant was leaking everywhere. "I need to replace this coupling," he shouted. "How are we doing on time?" 40 minutes left to fix this processor," Ryan called back. His voice sounded strained. "The computer system is completely fried, but I think I can bypass the damaged sections." Amy was working on a panel covered in strange alien symbols. "The biological filters are clogged with debris from the electromagnetic pulse. I'm cleaning them out, but it's slow work." Lisa was elbow-deep in electrical components, her hair standing up from static electricity. "Power coupling is damaged but repairable. Give me 10 more minutes." Jake forced himself to work faster. The radiation badge on his chest was clicking, like an angry insect, but he ignored it. His hands were shaking now, and he could feel nausea starting to build in his stomach. But the repair was almost done. "Got it!" he yelled, connecting the last piece of the pipe coupling. "Coolant is flowing again." "Filters are clear," Amy announced. "Power restored," Lisa added. Ryan's fingers flew over a jury-rigged control panel. "Computer systems coming back online. Atmospheric processor 1 is working again." Archive Unit 7 scanned the machinery with lights from his body. "Confirmed. This processor is functioning at 87% efficiency. Acceptable levels." They stumbled out of the processor room and headed for the second location. Jake checked his watch. They had been in the radiation zone for an hour and 15 minutes. His badge showed exposure levels that should have made him seriously sick, but he could still function. "How is everyone feeling?" he asked. "Like I got hit by a truck," Amy replied. "But I can keep going." "Dizzy and nauseous," Lisa said. "But my hands are still steady." Ryan looked pale and was sweating heavily. "I think I'm going to throw up, but not yet. Let's finish this first." The second atmospheric processor was in worse shape than the first. Part of the chamber had actually caught fire during the electromagnetic pulse, and the automatic fire suppression system had flooded everything with chemical foam. "This is going to take longer," Jake said, looking at the mess. "The whole filtration system needs to be rebuilt." They worked for another hour in the poisonous radiation. Jake's vision started to blur, and his hands felt like they belonged to someone else. But they kept going, replacing burned components and clearing debris from critical systems. Amy collapsed once while working on a biological monitor, but she got back up and kept going. Lisa had to stop twice to vomit, but she returned to her electrical repairs each time. Ryan's hands were shaking so badly that he could barely type, but he managed to get the computer systems running. "Processor 2 is online," Archive Unit 7 finally announced. "Efficiency at 79%. They had one more processor to fix, and less than 2 hours left before the station's life support failed completely. But when they reached the third location, Jake knew they were in trouble. The entire chamber had been destroyed. Not damaged, but completely destroyed. Twisted metal and melted components were scattered everywhere. "This is impossible," Lisa said, staring at the wreckage. "We can't rebuild this whole system in 2 hours." Archive Unit 7 scanned the damage. "Confirmed. This atmospheric processor cannot be repaired with available resources. Jake leaned against a wall feeling dizzy. The radiation sickness was getting worse, and he wasn't sure how much longer any of them could keep working. But then he had an idea. Archive. Can the station survive on just 2 processors? Negative. 3 processors are required to maintain life support for current population levels. What if we reduce the population load somehow? Archive Unit 7's lights flickered as he processed the question. If approximately 30% of current population were moved to emergency pods with independent life support, remaining population could survive on 2 processors. Emergency pods? Amy asked weakly. Short-range evacuation vessels designed for temporary occupation. Station has sufficient pods for emergency evacuation of non-essential personnel. Jake forced himself to think clearly despite the radiation. Sickness. How long would it take to evacuate 30% of the station? Approximately 90 minutes with current emergency procedures. Ryan looked up from where he was sitting on the floor. That gives us 30 minutes of safety margin. But who decides who gets evacuated? Lisa asked. Archive Unit 7 answered immediately. Emergency protocols specify evacuation priority. Visitors, non-essential students, faculty with no critical lay duties. They made their way back to the central core, stumbling and helping each other walk. The radiation badges on their chests had stopped clicking and were now showing solid red warning lights. When they entered the shelter, Professor Quillnax rushed over to them. You look terrible. Please tell me you were successful. 2 processors are working, Jake said, leaning heavily against Amy. But the 3rd one is completely destroyed. Archive Unit 7 says we need to evacuate about 30% of the population to emergency pods. Professor Quillnax's feathers stood up in alarm. Emergency evacuation? That has never been attempted with so many beings. It's either that, or everyone dies, Amy said simply. The professor looked at their radiation badges and made a sound like a bird in distress. These readings indicate you should all be dead or dying. We're not dead yet, Ryan said, though he immediately threw up on the floor after saying it. What followed was the most organized chaos Jake had ever seen. Professor Quillnax announced the evacuation plan, and thousands of beings began moving toward the docking bays where emergency pods were waiting. The evacuation pods were small and cramped, but they had their own life support systems. Jake and his friends were immediately taken to the medical bay, where alien doctors looked at them with amazement and confusion. According to these readings, one doctor said, "You have absorbed enough radiation to kill most species 3 times over, yet you are conscious and talking." "We're from a tough planet," Lisa said weakly. 3 hours later, the emergency evacuation was complete. 35% of the station's population was safely aboard emergency pods in orbit around the gas giant. The remaining population was breathing clean air provided by 2 working atmospheric processors. Jake woke up in the medical bay feeling like he had the worst flu of his life, but alive. Amy was in the bed next to him, pale but smiling. Lisa and Ryan were sitting up and arguing about something technical, which meant they were going to be fine. Professor Quillnax visited them the next day. His feathers were no longer standing up in alarm and he looked almost calm. "The emergency pods will return tomorrow when repairs are complete," he said. "Thanks to your actions, every being on this station survived." "Are we in trouble for violating safety protocols?" Jake asked. Professor Quillnax made that laughing sound again. "On the contrary, the station administration has decided to make some changes to human safety requirements." "What kind of changes?" Amy asked. "Effective immediately, humans will no longer be restricted to standard safety protocols. You will have access to advanced materials and equipment appropriate for your species' capabilities. We are also creating new courses designed specifically for Deathworlders students." "What about emergency response?" Lisa asked. "Human students will be invited to join the station's emergency response team. Your unique capabilities make you ideal for situations that would be impossible for other species." Ryan sat up straighter. "Does this mean we can take real classes now? With actual programming languages and real equipment?" "Yes," Professor Quillnax said. We have learned that treating humans like fragile beings was not just wrong, it was wasteful. Your species has abilities that could benefit everyone on this station. Over the following weeks, everything changed. Jake found himself working with advanced materials and real engineering challenges. Amy got to study actual alien specimens instead of holograms. Lisa worked with high-voltage electrical systems that made her previous classes seem like children's toys. Ryan was learning programming languages so advanced they made Earth computer science look primitive. But the biggest change was in how the other students treated them. Instead of being seen as dangerous walking disasters, humans were now respected as capable partners. Alien students regularly asked for their help with challenging projects, and study groups became much more collaborative. Zixathera approached Jake one day in the cafeteria. "I wanted to thank you again, not just for saving my life, but for showing us what humans are really capable of." "We're not that special," Jake said. "We just come from a planet that taught us to be tough, right?"